All right, welcome. So, you're building an AI rig, or maybe you're thinking about an upgrade, and you've hit that big fork in the road. Do you go for the absolute monster, the RTX 4090, or is the slightly more sensible RTX 4080 the smarter move? Believe me, that choice can make a huge difference in your workflow. So, let's break it all down. So yeah, this is the main event, right? The big AI showdown. We're going to cut right through all the marketing noise, lay out the raw specs side by side, see how they actually perform in the real world, and then weigh all the practical stuff to help you figure out which one is the perfect fit for you. You know what? Let's just get right to it. Here's the verdict up front. The 4090 is, without a doubt, the undisputed king when it comes to raw, face-melting performance. No contest. But, and this is a really big but, the 4080 is often the more practical, more balanced choice once you start thinking about real-world things like power, budget, and, well, just fitting the thing in your case. Now let's dig into the data that proves it. First things first, let's look at the tail of the tape. We're going to put these two GPUs head-to-head on paper and see what the raw numbers really tell us about what makes them tick. Okay, looking at this chart, it's pretty clear, right? The 4090 has a massive advantage, pretty much across the board. But for AI work, let's focus on the two specs that matter most. First, you've got CUDA cores. Think of those as the tiny little engines, the workhorses doing all the heavy lifting. And second, you have VRAM, which is your memory. That determines how big and complex the AI models you can even load onto the card are. And as you can see, the 4090 has a huge lead in both. Let's really zero in on those two numbers, because this is where the story is. The RTX 4090 is packing nearly 70% more CUDA cores for that raw number crunching power, and it has a full 50% more VRAM. For AI, VRAM is everything. It's king. If a model doesn't fit into your card's memory, you just can't run it, period. That extra 8 gigabytes on the 4090, that's the real game changer. It's the heart of why it's so dominant. And this is what all that hardware gets you. This chart shows the Tensor AI performance, measured in what's called TOPS. That stands for trillions of operations per second, which is just a wild number to even think about. But look at that jump, from 780 on the 4080 to over 1300 on the 4090. That is a massive leap. This is the specialized hardware doing the exact kind of math that makes AI happen, and it's doing it incredibly fast. Okay, so specs are one thing, but what does all of this actually mean when you sit down to do some work? Let's translate these numbers into the real world and see how they perform when you fire up an application you might actually use, like generating images with Stable Diffusion. So here's the deal. Both of these cards are fantastic for these kinds of tasks. I mean, they're absolute beasts for running AI stuff locally on your own machine. Whether you're creating some incredible high-res art, generating voiceovers, or just tinkering with smaller language models, this is where these consumer GPUs really shine. And hey, don't just take my word for it. TechRadar called the 4090 an absolute unit, and, well, it's pretty hard to argue with that description. That performance jump they're talking about isn't just marketing hype. It's a real, tangible leap that can seriously speed up your workflow if you're a researcher or developer. But we do need to have a quick reality check here. As incredibly powerful as these cards are, they are not data center GPUs. You are not going to be training a massive GPT-4 scale model from scratch on one of these. For that kind of heavy lifting, you need the really specialized stuff, like NVIDIA's A100 or H100 cards. These are for development, for research, and for running models on a, let's say, more personal scale. And that brings us perfectly to the practical side of things. See, pure performance is awesome, but it's only one part of the story. You also have to power it, you have to cool it, and you have to, actually fit it inside your computer case. Let's start with the RTX 4080. It has a power draw of 320 watts. Now, that's a lot of juice, for sure, but it's a number that most modern PCs and power supplies can handle without breaking a sweat. Now, let's look at its bigger sibling. Oof, the RTX 4090 jumps all the way up to 450 watts. That's a 130 watt difference. And that's not just about a higher electricity bill. It means you need to beef your power supply, and you have to get serious about your case's airflow. All that extra power turns into heat, and that heat has to go somewhere. And speaking of where it has to go, both of these cards are huge. We're talking seriously big. But the 4080 is usually just a little bit slimmer than the 4090. And trust me, that small difference in thickness can be the deciding factor on whether the card actually fits in your build, especially if you're not using a giant case. So, we've looked at the specs, we've seen the performance, and we've talked about the practicalities. Let's put it all together and help you make that final choice. Honestly, it really just boils down to this. You should go for the RTX 4090 if you absolutely need the best possible performance you can get from a single GPU. You're working with really complex models that need that huge VRAM, and of course, you have the budget and the system to handle its massive power and size needs. On the other hand, you should pick the RTX 4080 if you're looking for a super capable card that's way more power efficient and just easier to build around, especially if you're constrained by budget, power, or case size. It's an excellent and often much smarter choice. Of course, we've really only scratched the surface here today. For a much, much deeper dive, with more benchmarks and the full comparison, you should definitely head to the link you see on your screen. And hey, to make it easy for you, we've put a clickable version right down in the description. And that pretty much wraps it up. The 40 series cards are an incredible leap forward for doing AI on a consumer level. It really just leaves you with one final thought. With how fast all of this technology is moving, what kind of insane power is the next generation of GPUs going to put in our hands? Thanks for watching.